Hi, Rod Fleming in the Philippines here, and I've got to say that I'm going to start off with a big apology because I've been saying something for years and I now know that it's not true, okay? And I think it's quite an important thing to be able to do is to say, nah, I got that one wrong. And I know this now that I did get this one wrong. And there's something that I got wrong was that I didn't think that cis women, that's natal women, people, double X people, right, ever had autogynephilia. And it now appears that, yeah, this does exist. But it's a very interesting thing, and we're going to go to that in a minute. Let me explain, first of all, why I was so hostile to this. The reason I was so hostile to this idea was that people, frauds, and this man is a fraud. I don't care what you say, his scientific method is fraudulent and his methodology is deceitful. This particular person called Charles Moser produced a paper, I don't know, a number of years ago. It's constantly being churned up by AGP apologists, which basically was a bogus study which set out to show that women have autogynephilic experiences. It was like, you know, a woman puts on nice, sexy underwear and looks at herself in the mirror while she's being autogynephilic. Well, it's absolute nonsense. She is not being autogynephilic. She's just admiring herself in the mirror. You know, that's normal. That's absolutely normal. There's a huge difference between a woman doing that and a man doing it. And if you don't see that, then you don't get any of this. You know, you just don't understand any of this. The whole point is that autogynephilics are actually men. They're actually men. And when they look at themselves, dressed as women, they're indulging in this great big huge fantasy about themselves as these, you know, ravishingly sexy women, whereas a woman doing it might actually be a ravishingly sexy woman. An HSTS doing it might well be a ravishingly sexy woman. I tell you, I get treated to that one regularly, but not a man. Okay, so I was kind of hostile to this because I knew how fakers and really deeply unpleasant people like Julia Serrano had been using this kind of bogus study to push the idea that autogynephilia was normal female behavior, right? And that just doesn't make sense. So I was in the position of, I was saying, no, it doesn't happen. Women don't get autogynephilia. And the argument that I used for this was that, in fact, the paraphilias, of which autogynephilia is one, are rarely found in women. These are a group of paraphilias that don't usually happen in women. Although that may be changing. But you know, traditionally, they were not seen as being statistically significant amongst natal women. Now, do you know of an internet personality called Naomi Wu? She calls herself the sexy cyborg. And you probably do. You know, Naomi is quite a striking woman, visually at least, you know. And she's definitely a woman. Don't worry, Naomi is a woman, all right. Some time ago, last year, possibly slightly before, but it became really public last year, she came out as lesbian. And she says on her various bios, she says, you know, please send me money, but only what you can afford, because I'm just going to spend it on beer and women, you know. I mean, she has a fairly healthy attitude towards this. So she's lesbian. She was married to a man, but she says, this was just a marriage of convenience. Now, before you get, you know, oh my God, what's that? These were really very common in the West until about 50 years ago, 50, 60 years ago, that gay men particularly would marry straight women, but they wouldn't consummate the marriage. It would just be like, this gets us under the radar. And quite often the woman would be a lesbian, right? So this is fine. We can hide in plain sight here because people will think we're a married couple and then just go, carry on, do your thing. And they won't get any stash for it, you know, and that's the point. Naomi's living in China, and that's a very conservative society by modern Western standards anyway. And people do that, still do that for, it's a defense mechanism. They don't want to get themselves in trouble and maybe beaten up, arrested. Lots of things can happen to you, you know. So she'd been married to this guy and then they broke up and all the rest of it, and that's when she came out and said, I'm a lesbian, right? That marriage was never consummated. It was just, you know, defense mechanism, a da-di-da, all that. Been through that. So if you get a picture of Naomi up, and Naomi is obviously very proud of her assets, to put it mildly, you know, and it's interesting because she is a genuine lesbian. I mean, she has the attitudes towards women, you know, and I have been watching her channel and I looked at her Insta and all the rest of it. She has got attitudes towards women that are exactly the kind of attitudes that a butch lesbian would have, or a man would have, right? I mean, she checks them out. She does, and you know, she's quite open about it, you know, and about being in situations with women, which, you know, the kind of thing that, you know, a playboy would do. But she's very feminine in her presentation. Now, I thought about this for a while, and you know, that's real interesting. That this is like a really extreme form of lipstick lesbianism, and you know, there's always been this kind of sororal lesbianism where you find that women who've been maybe damaged, traumatized in some way by men, come together, and you know, they have this sort of sisterly love, which is really homophilia rather than homosexuality. You know, it's questionable how much actual sex is going on, and even if there is, there's no penetration. You know, this can't happen. But Naomi Wu looked totally different. And what I think is happening here is the flip of the new gay man. Now, the new gay man, right, let's just recap here. This is a sexual invert, right? That is, in sexual terms, a woman, right? Male body, female sexuality, because he's been inverted, right? Then develops an ETLE on himself as a really masculine guy, right? Because that's what he's attracted to, is masculine guys. He's not very masculine at all. So he brings himself into line with that. What had happened was that he was doing exactly the same thing as autogynephilic men do. You know, they have an ETLE on themselves as a beautiful woman, because that's what they're attracted to, beautiful women. And when the erotic target gets fixed on the self, then the self has to follow suit. Otherwise, every time you look in a mirror, it's like cognitive dissonance, folks. So inside this gay cult, this is how you get all these masculine clone gays, by the way, is they're not actually masculine at all. They're feminine. They've got female sexuality, but they've made themselves masculine in order to conform to their own ideal of the perfect lover, right? And I think that's what's happening with people like the aforementioned Naomi Wu. I think that what's happening here is that she has this, she's obviously very attracted to women, and particular kind of women, you know, who are very glamorous. And so she's made herself glamorous, you know, a kind of reflection of her target. So that the sexual target, the erotic target, has become the same as her actual self, and she's brought herself very convincingly into line with this. But if you look at Naomi, you know, she actually shows all the classic signs of a sexual invert. I mean, she's Chinese, and she's very, very tall. There are not very many tall Chinese women, right? You know, if you look at the bits of her body that she hasn't been able to sculpt to conform to her erotic target, then it's like, oh, wait a minute. And you know, I've said this before about Asians, is that a lot of Asian people look very feminine even when they're men, you know. And for a Westerner, because we're used to really craggy looking guys, you know, it's quite difficult for us. And you look at someone like Naomi and say, well, she's quite cute, you know. But then if you look at, she's not actually more cute than a vast range of Chinese men, right? So actually, she could well have been a butch lesbian. Easily, not a problem for her to do that. Instead of which, she's become this hyper-feminine expression. And I think that that's what's happening there. And that's why I think now, thank you Naomi, by the way, that in the circumstance of a female with sexual inversion, then you can indeed have autogynephilia. And what that tells you, and this is really important, what that tells you is that these philias, autogynephilia and autoandrophilia, are actually absolutely located on sexuality. They're a function of sexuality, not sex. So male sexuality produces autogynephilia, right? Whether the person exhibiting that is actually male, or in this case, female, right? And the same, by the same token, female sexuality will produce autoandrophilia. We've seen that happens in males because that's the new gay man. And in fact, if you read narratives online and talk to a new generation of so-called trans men, a lot of them, they're obviously autoandrophilic. It's very interesting. Female sexuality. So the sexuality and the philias go very, very close together. Okay. I think that's possibly enough for today because I have started to lose my voice. I'll see you later.